Reduce poverty by economic growth. In this blog post, I will tell you some important points to reduce poverty by economic growth. Economic growth should be the primary strategy to reduce poverty. In the post-World War II era, economic development has lifted more than 1 billion people out of extreme poverty. Economic growth is a powerful poverty reduction tool that can result in rising incomes, better educational opportunities, and increased access to health care for the world's poor. The world has made great progress toward reducing extreme poverty. It is estimated that almost 1 billion people in the developing world are currently living on less than $1.25 per day, a dramatic decrease from 1990 when the benchmark was $1.90 per day. Despite this achievement, 1.2 billion people globally remain mired in extreme poverty, making eradicating it a continuing challenge that requires comprehensive solutions primarily based on economic growth and social inclusion policies of developing countries. Economy growth helps people move out of poverty. The economy has been growing for the past several years and unemployment rates have fallen to their lowest levels since the 1960s. This is good news, but it is not an automatic recipe for poverty reduction. We know from research that economic growth does not automatically result in poverty reduction. In fact, in some cases, it can actually make poverty worse. In order to reduce poverty in a sustained way, we need policies and programs that help people move out of poverty by increasing their ability to earn a decent income. The number of people living in extreme poverty fell by more than 1 billion in the last decade, a historic achievement that could be reversed if we don't maintain today's global economic momentum. The World Bank estimates that 8 million jobs are needed each year just to keep up with population growth, and many more to reduce unemployment and poverty. If the world is going to meet this demand, we have to focus on helping people get work. Average incomes need to change. We need more people earning enough to support themselves and their families. For some people, that means making more money. For others, it means finding ways to cut spending so they can spend less but still have enough money left over each month. But what if you make more than $50,000? How do you help people move out of poverty? One way is by lowering your own expenses so that you can donate the difference to charity or invest in programs that help lift people out of poverty. There are other ways too. Find ways to reduce the amount you spend on groceries each month, and then donate or invest the savings. Find ways to cut your cable bill, and then donate or invest the savings. Find ways to lower your cell phone bill, and then donate or invest the savings. If you're making less than $22,000 a year, for example, then you're living below the poverty line. And if you're making $22,000 a year or more and still qualify as poor, then you've got some serious financial problems on your hands. The fact is that many people are earning an average income but still struggling to make ends meet. These people don't have enough money to pay their bills or save any money for retirement or their children's college education, and that's why they're stuck at this income level. How do you fix this problem? Well, one option would be to increase the minimum wage so that it covers actual living costs in each state. But if we want to change the culture at large, we need to teach people how much money they really need, not what they think they need, in order to live comfortably without having debt or financial stress every day of their lives. Constraints for human capital development. In a friendly tone, instead of focusing on the skills and knowledge required to help individuals move out of poverty, we should be focusing on the social and cultural constraints that prevent people from developing human capital. The paper Constraints for Human Capital Development in Order to Help People Move Out of Poverty uses an example from Bangladesh to illustrate a failure in the Human Capital Development (HCD) approach to helping people improve their lives. The HCD approach focuses on the skills and knowledge required to move out of poverty, but ignores the social and cultural constraints that prevent people from developing human capital. The paper uses the example of a well-educated man who has a small tea shop. Because of his education, he is able to make more money than his uneducated peers. However, he cannot expand his business because he is not allowed to speak with women, including other vendors at the market. The women will not work for him because they are too shy. It is socially unacceptable for them to work for a man who isn't their husband or father. So even though this man is well educated, he can still be viewed as poor because he lacks power, influence, and connections. I think the best way to help people move out of poverty is to give them the tools and skills they need to build up their lives. Human capital development, as it's known, is a long-term solution that can have lasting positive effects on people's lives. Here are some constraints that might prevent human capital development in order to help people move out of poverty. Insecure tenure. For example, in India, There are many poor people who have no legal right or claim over the land they live on or work at. This makes them vulnerable to losing their livelihood or means of income if they lose access to their land. Illiteracy. People living in poverty often cannot read or write basic texts in their native languages, which limits their ability to learn new skills and get better jobs that require more education. Lack of access to basic infrastructure. For example, many people living in poverty do not have access to clean water and sanitation, which has a negative effect on public health and increases the costs for individuals and families seeking medical treatment for diseases caused by poor sanitation. Poor health. People living in poverty are more likely to suffer from malnourishment and diseases caused by poor sanitation. Economic growth. Increased jobs. The increased jobs and money will allow the poor to have more opportunities in life, such as education, housing, healthcare and so on. Economic growth. Increase the tax revenue, which can be used to reduce poverty. It is often used as a measure of how well an economy is doing. Economic growth can also be measured by looking at productivity, which is the amount of output produced per unit of input. Economic growth contributes to poverty reduction by creating jobs, which makes it easier for those who are poor to get out of poverty. If someone becomes employed and gets a job, then he or she will have more money coming in every month, and this will help them pay for food and other basic needs. In addition, if a person has a job and earns more money than before, he or she may be able to save some money or invest it into his or her business. Economic growth will increase literacy. The World Bank's World Development Report 2019, a report on the global state of affairs, points out that economic growth is the single most important factor in reducing poverty. The report also says that education is essential for economic growth and prosperity. Another report by the World Bank Group, Learning for All, Global Monitoring Report on Education Quality and Equity, shows that in low-income countries, LICs, only 20% of primary students reach grade 4 able to read adequately, only 28% of secondary students complete grade 10 able to do so. In upper-middle-income countries, UMICs, this figure rises to 62% for primary school completion rates and 66% for secondary completion rates. The ERS analyzed data from over 100 countries in order to determine whether there was a link between economic growth and literacy rates. It found that higher levels of economic growth were associated with higher literacy rates. The researchers also found that countries with high levels of education and income tend to have lower fertility rates than those with lower levels.